square root simplification. Here's our problem. It says to rewrite the following in simplified radical form. Okay, so radical 75, or the square root of 75. Here's a property of square root that you really need to know. So this is important to put in your notebook. You can see here that any number under the radical sign that can be written as a product of two numbers can be broken up into the square root of each of those numbers. Okay, so that looks kind of confusing here, but it's really not when we look at the practicality. So let's use that rule right here. So inside the square root we've got 75. 75 can be written as 25 times 3, and the most important thing is that 25 is a perfect square. Remember, perfect squares. 2 squared is 4. 4 is a perfect square. 3 squared is 9. That's a perfect square. 4 squared equals 16. That's a perfect square. So this can go on and on and on. 5 squared, 25. Perfect square. So you just need to know the terminology. These are all perfect squares, and you know there's lots and lots of them. You could go on and on. So now we get to use this property here, and we can say, oh, the square root of 75 is the same thing as the square root of 25 times 3, which is the same thing as the square root of 25 times the square root of 3. And because 25 is a perfect square, it simplifies to be just a plain 5. So the square root of 25 becomes 5, the square root of 3 stays the square root of 3, and we end up with a final answer of just 5 radical 3. That's how we'd write our final answer. Okay, one more quick example. Okay, so here we have square root of 80. Now the key is to look for factors that are a perfect square. Perfect square factors. So in other words, is there a perfect square that goes into this? Like 4 will go into that, and 4 is a perfect square. You could break it down into a bunch of pieces, but you always want to look for the largest perfect square. So 9 doesn't go. 16, hey, 16 goes. So since 16 is a perfect square and 16 will go into 80, we can break that up. This is a little bit shorter. Notice I'm almost doing 2 steps in one here. I'm breaking 80 up into 16 times 5, and then I'm also breaking the radical up into the radical 16 and radical 5. And we know, of course, radical 16 is just 4. Radical 5 can't be simplified. And there's our answer, all done.